Welcome to the Understanding Boys podcast. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which this podcast is recorded, the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to their leaders past, present and emerging. The Understanding Boys podcast is a series of conversations exploring what it is to be a good man these days. And if you had a story that you could tell a boy of say 14 and he'd listen, what would that story be? And that's really what I'm asking our guests today. I'm Dr. Ray Swan, and we're a community of teachers and parents concerned with the education and growth of boys and young men in the modern world. This series is brought to you by Brighton Grammar, an all-boys school in Melbourne. To learn more about the podcast, please visit understandingboys.com.au. Today's podcast we speak with Will Pucovski. Will is a professional athlete, playing cricket at the state level and being selected for the Australian squad. In 2019, he was awarded the Bradman Young Cricketer Award at the Allan Border Medal Ceremony. Today's podcast, we speak about Will's professional life, his work as a cricketer and what it's taught him, and he shares with us 4 key questions that he wished he knew when he was a young man. We hope you enjoy our conversation with Will. So joining us on today's podcast is Will Pucovski. Welcome to the Understanding Boys podcast, Will.
Thank you very much, Ray. Thanks for having me on.
Working as an elite athlete, and building your career and, setting yourself up for success, one of the things I was curious to find out from you, Will, was what kind of a role has mum and dad played with that?
Mum and dad have played a humongous role in that, I think, from literally as long as I can remember. Dad's been great for me because he sort of played the double role. I'm an only child, so he's played the double role of sort of big brother and father at the same time. So, yeah, since I was very young, we were in the backyard playing all kinds of sport. I still remember my first hit of cricket with him down at the local nets was with tiny little shin guards underneath my pads because I didn't have pads that were sort of safe but also small enough for me. So, they've been really good. And then I also had dad coaching most of my junior teams. So we had our junior soccer team and junior cricket team, which sort of crossed over because we had a lot of people playing both in the friendship group. And, he's been huge for me since I was very young and has stayed that sort of steadying, mentor or force that's always been beside me throughout the whole journey. And then mum, on the other hand, probably played more of the, emotional or mental helper, if there's, for lack of a better term, especially with me being the son of the coach. There were a few arguments about different things that had happened during certain events. So mum had to sort of facilitate the discussion whenever they'd come up. But
can't imagine anyone having an argument with Jules. That's not possible, is it?
No, definitely not. So it's been she's the mediator, and then it sort of bounces off from there.
Yeah, great. And I guess in thinking about that now, that that you're sort of, you're a man now, and obviously in the world and doing things, when you look back on that, and obviously their role has changed, but in those formative years, what were some of the things that they did? Obviously playing peacemaker, obviously spending time with you. But if I was a parent listening, what would you say were some of the real keys to being a good parent?
I think dad sort of got the balance perfect between pushing me but not pushing me to things that I didn't want to do. So he sort of got that balance right where he knew what I loved and would sort of help me on that path, but he would never force me to do anything. He'd never say, you got to do this to be this or anything like that. He sort of let me, run my own race in that regard where he knew I had the passion for it, and that passion would drive me to do the things that I sort of needed to do or wanted to do to get better at whatever sport. But, for me it was also a bit of a different thing because I was playing 2-3 different sports up until 15, 16. So it wasn't like he was saying, oh, well, you got to give up footy and soccer at 12 years old to focus on your cricket because you're better at cricket. It was sort of that holistic encouragement that, it all helps to some degree. And you look back and you go, playing school soccer and school footy with my mates, even though it probably wasn't leading to a, professional thing in the future, was just some of the best times you have as a kid and as an athlete. And dad was particularly awesome at that, where he would just sort of let you go and do your own thing whilst also sort of offering you that guidance and support And then mum also sort of, probably played that more sort of emotional supporting role where she'd sort of make sure I was getting my school on track as well and everything along those lines, but sort of making sure I was enjoying stuff and checking in with me in that regard, whereas dad was probably more, I guess, playing the sports with me, if that's the right way to put it.
Yeah, it's great advice and really good observations. I know as a dad myself, that's something that I sort of struggle with a bit, like how often do I push and when do I insist and then when do I sort of let my son or daughter, fail actually, because that's sort of what, you got the helicopter view as a parent. You can kind of go, wow, if you keep doing this now, then, the deferred gratification will kick in later. Sort of how you sort of manage that balance. But it sounds like your parents have done a really great job of doing that. Yeah,
they were very good at that. It is probably like you probably look back at it, I'm 22 now, and it's a lot easier to see, I guess, looking back now than when you're actually in the moment. But I can sort of remember just little different things, even when I was playing, like when dad was coaching and stuff like that, where if I started acting like a bit of a brat, he'd knock me into line. And that teaches you pretty young that that kind of behaviour isn't appropriate and you can't do that. And it probably gets amplified because you sort of get the embarrassment of doing it in front of all your mates and stuff as well. But even those little things just taught me that down the line how important that sort of team aspect and working with others and stuff is, and it's sort of not all about you, which was also pretty important, I thought.
Yeah, there's a couple of really big lessons in that, isn't there? There's one is about, it's not about you, and the other one I guess I was hearing you say as well is that, understanding what rules are and, what's the purpose of rules and what's the purpose of boundaries, and that they help to organise us, they help to, create the conditions that everybody can have a go, and they help to, make it more fun because then you can see that there's a score and, they make it fair, all those sorts of things. Well, I think a lot of young guys, as they get older, their relationship to rules can be a bit tested a bit, and it doesn't always work out. They get angry if they get told off by the umpire, or they get a free kick or a decision that doesn't quite go their way, which can be pretty tough as well. I don't know if you've suffered any of those recently, Will.
Oh, plenty. So that's I couldn't agree more with that. Like, that's probably been the big thing for me, where you almost look on, and like I probably noticed it because I've done a bit of sort of coaching with younger kids over the last few years, and you notice which kids sort of respect those boundaries and which ones don't. And you can just, it does probably come down to the parenting in the end for the ones that sort of get pulled up young when they're carrying on, and we all carry on like idiots when we're young, but those ones that sort of get, and it's never in an aggressive manner or anything like that. It's just you know what, that's not acceptable. And especially in sport, like it sort of does reflect in other areas of life as well, but you can't, like being like, as you said, like angry at an official or something, like a referee, like they're just trying their best. And if they stuff up, it's pretty hard to see in that moment because you're thinking, the whole world's against you in a game of sport, like, and you get a decision that doesn't go your way. But like at the end of the day, they're there. You couldn't play without them. So it's probably learning that stuff early and really sort of knuckling down, and sort of putting all that sort of bad behaviour, I guess, to one side as much as you can, and then sort of venting your frustration in a different way, whether it's sort of internally or like when you get to the rooms, like sort of everyone's been sort of, I guess, a victim of carrying on too much when they get out in cricket, or, throwing their mouth guard on the ground in footy or something like that. But it's definitely important to learn that respect early, I think.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is you're saying about the officials, it's another real key, I reckon, is, separating the person from the behaviour. So, that you may be feeling this or doing these kinds of things, but that's separate to who you are. So you're not for a young kid as well, not shaming them into, you're a hothead or you're a, you can't do this or you're that, when that can become really difficult to sort of work your way out of as a young man, but saying, look, these are the rules, this is how we play it. Can you see how the umpire is doing what he or she is doing? And so on. So yeah, some really great advice. So let's talk a little bit about, your career and sort of where you're headed now, and public selection. You're looking for eventually the national team potentially, and playing at state level in a pretty tough sport. It's a small team. It's a team that again, the national team's had a lot of scrutiny over the last few years. For a whole bunch of reasons. We love, it's part of the national consciousness to play for the national team and all those sorts of things. Can you share with us a little bit about what that process has been like for you, and what has it taught you? It's
been very surreal. Like, it's nothing you can imagine. you get this image that, oh, if you're a professional athlete, your life is perfect. Like, all you do is play sport for a living. You get paid pretty well. You know, you get to strut around and think you're pretty cool and stuff. But I would argue it's actually quite the opposite. There's a lot of really great things that come with it, a lot of sort of really satisfying highs, but there is some really sort of dark lows as well that go with it. So it's probably that sort of 0 to 100 scale, whereas a lot of jobs probably sit between the 40 to 60%, I guess, if you had it on a chart thingy or whatever you want to call it. But I think a lot of cricket and a lot of that selection stuff is that 0 or 100. Like, you've made 100 and all of a sudden you're on top of the world, and everyone in Australia thinks you're going to average 80 in the test side, and then you make 2 ducks in a row and all of a sudden you are overrated. You're just everyone hyped you up too much and you're useless and all that stuff. So I think I'm still working on this, and this is probably one of the things that I've really put a lot of effort into in the last couple of years. Is a lot of my stuff happened really quickly, so I got thrown into that spotlight without really having the guidance or knowing how to deal with it, because it sort of all just felt like it happened overnight almost. And one of my things has been about trying to shut out all that noise and go, all I can do is present my best self every time I go to cricket training, every time I'm out in public, every time I'm with my friends, when I'm with my girlfriend, when I'm with my family. All I can do is bring my best self for that day. I can train really hard, I can put all the effort in, and then hopefully the results take care of themselves and my talent comes through. But I think I've been stuck worrying about what all these people think of me and thinking about how I play or what I do. And realistically, at the end of the day, they're not you. So, as I guess it sounds bad to say, but like, their opinion is irrelevant. Like, they have no idea what it's like, especially people who have never played the game before. They've got no idea what it's like. And all you can do, as I said, is bring your best self. And that has been something I've put a lot of work into, and hopefully it starts to pay off in the future, because it is one of my dreams that I've always wanted to play for Australia. I want to be successful for Australia, but that's probably one thing that I've had to go, you know what, I've really got to put my time and effort into that, even away from the game, when I'm just practicing sort of different sort of mental routines and stuff like that, to ensure that when I get there, I'm ready to go and I know how to handle it.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're really focusing on building a solid foundation that, you know, can weather the storms of those things at the extremes. You know, that, as you were saying, it's actually a great image of that, you know, 0 to 20 and the 80 to 100 sort of aspects of the role, and particularly I think for cricket. I mean, it's one of the rare sports that you can actually be in really good form and go out early in an innings. You get a really good ball, and you know, it's a really difficult thing to be able to manage that. Are you able to talk through any sorts of strategies that you've found that, you know, that say if I was a kid listening to this, I could even, you know, have a go at?
I think one that's worked for me really well, that I think is very applicable, and I wish I did it during school as well, is I started about 1.5 years ago. And then with a lot of things, I feel like you get really on them for a month or two, things start to go well and you think, oh, I don't need that anymore, like I'm flying. And I did this last year, and every morning I'd write down 3 or 4 things. So one is like, what is my best self today? So I think this is really applicable at school as well. So if you go, you know what, I am feeling a bit tired today, and that's okay. So at school, maybe I won't be as energetic or whatever as I usually am, but I can still apply myself in these classes. I can use, you know, a study period to sort of relax a bit and stuff like that. So I go, what is my ideal self today? Another one is like, what's one thought that I want to be conscious of? So that can often be like, I found at school, like if it was a Monday, you'd almost feel sick just because it was a Monday. Like, you're like, oh, it's such a long week ahead. Like, I got so much stuff to do. I got this essay to write. I got this to do. But if you go like, the thought I'm going to be conscious of today is I can't be stuffed, and you go, I'm going to reframe that today and just go, you know, I'm just a bit flattered today, or something like that, and just reframe it. So it's like, I'm just a bit flattered today, but I can still go to school, learn a few things and get something out of the day. And then the other two, one of them is how do I want to act today? So that can be, along the lines of, you know, I want to be bubbly. I want to be up and about. I want to be, you know, I want people to feel better from being around me. I want to be sort of the life of the party. Well, not at school. You don't want to party, do you? But you get the gist of it. And then how do I want to speak today? So that probably links in or ties to all of them, because I feel like a lot of the time you can go, oh, I can't be stuffed, and everything about the day sucks. Like you'll go, oh, I'm too tired to do gym. Oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Oh, this sucks. This sucks. But if you go, nah, like I'm going to speak in a way which sort of sees the positive side to everything. You go, well, guess what? If I lift my weight, stay in the gym, I'm going to be bigger and I'm going to look better in summer. So that's going to be a bonus for me, or something along those lines. It's just a way of, I know it probably sounds a bit basic, but it's just a way of rephrasing things. And it literally, I have my book next to my bed, and I've started doing it again in the last month or two. And I just, before I check my phone, before my head leaves the pillow, pick it up, write these 4 things down. So you've got the thing there, and it takes a minute and a half max, and then your day's started and you've got sort of those focus points for the day, which I think is very applicable, and I wish I did it at school as well.
Yeah, it's outstanding advice. It reminds me a little bit of the Buddhist tenets around, right speech, right action, and that sort of also not necessarily, associating to the context. Like you're kind of saying, like, okay, so that's what it is, but this is how I'm choosing to be today. I think it's really fantastic advice, and I love the reframe around it as well. I know particularly with young guys, I think there's always that thing where you're like, you can't always see clear of it because you've got changes in your body, you've got pressures, you've got all sorts of things happening, and to actually sort of say, well, I'm going to look at trying to do these things. I accept that this is what I can and can't control, but actually saying, yeah, look, I could. And it's sort of maintaining that positive trajectory. Like I'm looking up, I'm looking forward, I'm sort of trying to follow my true north, so to speak.
Yeah. And I think like even with study and stuff, it can apply to that. Because if you go, look, my ideal self today, like I've had a big couple of days, like I can't commit to 3 hours of study tonight. You know what? If I get an hour done and it's a good hour, then I've actually achieved something that day, rather than a lot of the time you might feel like you can't be bothered. You'll procrastinate for ages, and then by the time you're doing something, you're hating doing it anyway, so you're sort of not getting anything out of it. But on those days in particular, I find this helpful because I've still achieved something today even though I wasn't at my best. And I think that's one thing I've also tried to learn to accept, is that you're not going to be at your best every day, but how do I still, get something out of it, rather than think, oh, I suck because I'm not at my best today, so I can't get anything out of it, sort of thing. And I think that can be really handy, especially as you get older with school and it gets a bit more serious in year 11 and 12.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let's talk a bit about mentors. And I suspect obviously, in your career and in your time, and you've obviously spoken about the role that mum and dad have played, but outside of that, what have mentors meant to you in your journey?
I think it's been an interesting one because you sort of have different mentors from different areas of your life. So at school you have probably 3 or 4 teachers that I found I had a really good connection with, that like I could sort of talk to, and you can joke around with them and stuff, and they almost are sort of one of your mates at school as well, but they're sort of a guiding, sort of that father figure, I guess, at school. So I was really lucky. I have a few of them. I know Brendan Savage doesn't work at the school anymore, but he was my year 7 form teacher, and we like still message every now and again, just catching up, seeing how each other are going and stuff. And it's amazing that once you're out of school, you realise that they're actually people too, and they've got their own lives, and you can actually have a normal conversation with them outside that as adults. And that was one thing I sort of found funny leaving school. And I had a fair few at school, I would say. He was really good. Tim Marshall, I've sort of stayed in touch with. Yourself and Feather were really good as well. And you just have those people that you have that thing where you could just go and chat to them for 10 or 15 minutes about whatever's going on in your life. And I found that really handy at school, especially I had a fair bit going on in year 11 and 12 with different head injuries, and I was going away for cricket trips, and I felt like I was always all over the shop. So having that sort of steady group of people there that you knew were on your team really helped. Mum and Dad, I know we're trying to avoid them for this topic, but they're obviously those constants, I think. They're just always there. They're always there to support you. And then I think from a cricketing sense, it's sort of changed for me. I've never had a specific one, I wouldn't think. It's sort of as you go through the system, different people come into your life. And I'm still very young in terms of in a cricketing sense, I would say. So there's blokes that you sort of aspired to to be like as a young kid, that all of a sudden you're playing with them and you're sitting there going like, Jesus, what is going on here? Like, this is unbelievable. So I'd like Cameron White would be a good example of that, who's ended up being a really good mentor for me. And I'm able to talk to him a lot about different cricketing experiences because he's been through it. And then you've sort of got that base friendship as well from getting to know them through your sport. So I think it's important that whatever area of life you go into, you sort of understand what people's roles are. Again, I don't want it to make it sound like it's all about you, but if you had like you in the middle and you got your work life, your personal life, your school life or your study life, like who are the people that you trust most in those areas that you know can sort of help you? And I guess I heard this thing this morning about sort of filling up your petrol tank and who fills it up for you, who fills you with energy when you need it the most. And I actually really liked it because it sort of goes, all right, well, at school, these specific people do it. At work, these specific people do it. At home, these specific people do it. And you sort of get a bit more of a gauge for who those important people are.
The other thing I took from what you just said was about, relationships over time and how they can become that sort of, I guess, that constancy. And when you get to know people over time and you realise, oh, my God, they're human beings outside of school. It always makes me laugh when you see kids outside of school because they always look at you like, what the heck are you doing here? Like, you shouldn't exist anywhere.
It's 100% true, though. You're just like, when you go back, you're like, oh, this is just, you're actually a human being. You've got your own problems. You've got your own life and everything. And then at school, they're just like, oh, these people are like, oh,
just in
they're
the
like
way.
your gods. Like, you have to sort of bow down to them all the time. You have to, live off their every word. And then you're like, oh, hang on a minute. I can actually get on with you on a human level.
Yeah, it's so funny, isn't it? Nothing quite like seeing someone, down at Southland or something like that, just for a shock.
Pretending you avoid it, just like putting the hand up, making sure they didn't see you, or avoiding them at all costs.
So let's chat. We've kind of talked a little bit about the game of cricket and how it can be very unforgiving at times. But also a lot of what you've already spoken about, it's clear, I think, and it'll be clear to our listeners just how much, your sporting life has already taught you and what a wise head on your shoulders already. What are some of the other things that cricket's taught you, Will?
It's taught me how to be a better loser than I was, I think, because you end up losing a lot. Like whether it's on a personal level or on a team level, you have to accept as quickly as you can that things aren't going to go well all the time. And I found that particularly hard because I hate losing, whether it's on an individual or a team level.
Or on the PlayStation.
Or on the PlayStation, particularly on the PlayStation, actually. That's number one. But I guess it's a tough one to answer because it's sort of, there's just different aspects of life that I guess you see so much of cricket reflected in. I don't know if that's because it is my life, so I see it all, but I sort of have ended up believing in karma quite a bit, just purely based on cricket, just because I sort of look at it and I go like, if I put the effort in and the energy in and all that stuff, then I will eventually get rewarded, but I have to be patient enough to accept that there might be some hiccups along the way. I think one thing cricket probably has taught me the most is that it isn't everything. There's so much more to life, and I'm still learning this, but I put so much weight, I guess, on my own shoulders, I think, in order to succeed. And as I said, I'm still trying to learn this, but by the same token, there's so, like, at the end of the day, it's a ball, a bat, and like just a bunch of people playing a sport that some idiot made up 120 years ago. And I put so much, I guess, on the line for that. Like, I feel like a lot of the time it guides my happiness or my sadness or whatever it may be. So having that perspective, like, is tough to have, especially in those moments. And I'm sure a lot of people have this with their jobs where they probably go and they're like, this is everything. Like, if I stuff this up today or whatever, like, I'm a failure or whatever. And the only probably difference is in professional sport, you get criticised by sort of a wider public, whereas you just get criticised maybe internally or just criticise yourself. But I think that's sort of the big one, where if you can get perspective in whatever you're doing, even if it is your Year 12 exams or something like that, or first 18 footy, like, it's a game of sport or it's an exam. Like, if you don't do as well as you'd like, you can still go do well at uni next year and, then suddenly you're in the course you want to do, or, you might have a different passion by then anyway. So it's just one of those really tough things where in the moment, you feel like everything is riding on it. I mean, literally everything. And then all of a sudden you get a big injury. Like I've had a few concussions and a few issues related to that. And all of a sudden your health is a lot more important, or a family member gets sick and all of a sudden, it's just another game of sport and stuff. So I think keeping that perspective is probably one of the tougher things to do. But cricket has taught me that the more you just try and enjoy the things that you love, which cricket is for me, rather than treat it as a sort of, life or death, I've got to do well, the better off you're going to be.
And it strikes me as a game. I mean, it's so much about every ball, isn't it? It's a 5-day game in the test match level. For a lot of sports, there's nothing like that. And then it keeps coming down to these just really particular moments.
Yeah, that is it in a nutshell. Like people go, how can you enjoy sport where you can play for 5 days and it could still be a draw? And I'm like, it's not that though. It's the fact that I think I worked it out, it's about 680 micro battles, 640 micro battles in a day. Then you times that by 5 and it's sort of, your whole individual thing rides on making a good decision most of the time. And then, so it's just unbelievably complex but unbelievably simple at the same time.
Yeah, it's another amazing paradox about the game. I think one of the things that it does attract armchair experts like myself.
Yeah. So every sport's easier from the sidelines, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm sure you've had plenty of bad advice from people like me as well over the years.
Never had bad advice from you, but maybe some others.
You're too kind, mate. Thank you very much. With the, one of the things I love about the game, again, as an observer, is you have these there's like a lore, like an LORE lore of cricket, great stories and moments in games and history and, and again, it seems to reveal something about our human character as well. Have you got any good cricketing stories that you've either experienced or, what would be the best cricketing story that you've come across?
Best cricketing story. You kept that very open. There's different sort of elements of cricket that I feel like I've got different stories for, which sort of sum up things well. I might generalise this a bit and just say like the fact that when, I guess in cricket, you think that your way is how everyone's thinking or feeling. And like then I'll go and speak to Sam Harper, who's one of my best mates and is also a professional cricketer. And the way he's thinking or feeling about an identical situation, sort of as it seems to the outside world, is completely different. Like and I find that fascinating that you're playing the same sport if you're in a near enough exactly the same situation as each other, yet your way of looking at it is completely different. And I think that sort of is probably summed up in a variety of things in like whether it's study or parenting or something like that. Like the way different people operate, like people are just going to operate differently and that's how the world works. But I think learning your, best way to do things is how I perform my best, like by going, all right, how does Will Pucovski do this? Not how does Ray Swan do this or how does Ross Featherston do this or whatever. It's in anything I do, it's how I, feel like I should do it. And I know that's probably not a great funny story or something like that, but it's probably just like a weird intricacy that I've sort of learnt, I think, just by, talking about different things and like my fears or my things that get me going are completely different to the next person. And I think one other thing is that you have no idea how powerful your words can be. Like you might say something to someone thinking it's completely innocent and fun, but something's happened to them, which means that triggers them completely and sends them into a spiral. So it's like trying to be careful with how you speak to people and how you present yourself in that sense can be a lot more critical than what you would think, I would say.
Yeah, and it's an interesting aspect of professional cricket, isn't it? Is banter and how cricket being a mental game, and obviously there's a physical challenge of being out in the field or batting for over days, but there's also that sense and I guess a right sense in that you want to compete mentally as well with your opposing team. But at times, banter in Australian cricket at least has maybe gone too far or, it has upset people or whatever. I mean, what's your sort of take on how banter has changed in cricket more generally?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think personally, I think it's very old school to think like you win at all costs. Like, I don't really see, I feel like it almost gets used against you if you don't believe in that, which I find quite disturbing, I guess. And that's not just in cricket, that's in everything. Like, if you want to play sport, you've got to try and win at all costs. But that isn't, I don't think, the best way to go about it personally. And I think it's a bit backwards for where the world has come to. Friendly banter or sort of funny banter still well and truly has a place. Like, my whole friendship group is based around fun, sort of, fun banter where everyone sort of thrives off it in a way where, and it's how a lot of boys are going to act, like, especially. And even, I just find it quite difficult to comprehend that win at all cost mentality still exists, because I think there is a line, and there's obviously been some things that have been spoken about in the media in regards to Australian cricket, which has seen them try and sort of shift that, I guess, where what people see as acceptable. So, and I think there is a lot that goes on in cricket, but as I said, a lot of people get triggered by different things. So there is smart ways to go about it. There's smart ways to get inside an opponent's head without having to take it that step too far. And I think most people have a much better understanding these days of what that step too far is, whether, again, it's at school or whether it's with your friends or whether it's on a sporting field. But I think the world's still learning to a degree. But, it's an interesting one, I think.
It is, and it's hard to know, isn't it? Because as you said earlier, you don't always know where someone's button is, and sometimes you can inadvertently, trigger it, and, if it's in a contest, that can come across, and how it can be perceived can be, really different to actually how it was intended. And I know with a lot of young guys that I work with, that it's a big lesson that, the giver and the receiver, and actually, you may have intended for, your comment to be directed in this way, but actually it was received in a really different way to that, and you probably weren't aware of it. But here's a little bit about why that's not okay. And I think it's really refreshing to hear. You talk about not wanting to win, or that the idea of not winning at winning of all costs is actually is really a fraught one, because I think that it doesn't really accept what is a true contest. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. And it's the thing that I don't like is sometimes it can be looked at as, that doesn't mean you're competitive. This is probably more particularly in a sporting sense, but that couldn't be further from the truth. It just means that, I guess, the way you've been brought up is probably different to how sport was played 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. And I think in that thing that we was discussing before about you don't know how people are going to perceive things or how it might affect them, I think a lot of that is about earning the right with people. And I know this might sound a bit sort of on the line, but like, if you're incredibly close with someone, like, I know exactly my best mates from school, I know how to push all their buttons. I know what's too far. I know what isn't. So particularly if you're not that close with someone, it's probably best to stay on that conservative side just until you know them well enough. Like, you've earned the right to actually know them to such a degree that you know exactly how to push them or what's friendly banter and stuff like that. So I think that's one, especially in school, when you're sort of going through and you're sort of trying to be cool in that middle age group. I think from like year 7 through to sort of year 10, I reckon, was when you noticed a lot of people, including myself, and I'm sure we'll go into a bit more of this later, but like, you think, I want to do things so everyone thinks I'm cool, but like, at the end of the day, you will move past that and realise that, God, I was an idiot when I was doing that stuff. So I think that's a big one as well, where when you think you're trying to be cool, you're actually not doing anyone any favours, including yourself.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, you think about that advice, which is great advice, and you think about that in the online space where people put up things. Not only have they not earned the right, they have absolutely no idea how other people are going to receive it. And I think not only for young people, but for people of all ages, we see time and time again, daily, in fact, the negative impacts of really not understanding, what people are saying and how they're saying it, and and more importantly, how it's being received by other people.
Yeah, for sure. And probably like a personal sort of anecdote for that is, I've had a few sort of, I guess, things that have come out in the media and they've been perceived differently by different people, but I've sort of seen a few things where things have been written about me personally, which are just completely untrue. That like journalists as well, who are, I guess, meant to be, specialists in, finding facts and working off that stuff. And then some of the stuff you read or hear on radio or whatever, and you go like, you've never spoken to me. You've never spoken to anyone close to me. You have no idea what's going on with me. So like maybe show a bit more respect for, the situation. Like you don't have the right to comment on it, I don't feel like, other than the facts that have been presented to you, which obviously weren't correct because I was reading or hearing these things going like, that's just not true. So I guess that's on a more holistic, outlook, but it certainly happens within schools as well, where different rumours start floating around about different people, and without actually understanding that person or knowing what's going on in their life, you don't really have a right, I don't think, to judge what they're doing necessarily, especially, I guess, in a public forum, which in a school's case could be in your group of 15 or 20 mates or something like that.
Yeah, and I guess also it invites us to think a bit about when we hear negative things about other people, maybe there's, what we were saying a bit earlier, separate the person and the behaviour, and, maybe that there's some other perfectly reasonable explanations for what's going on, or including one of the reasonable explanations is maybe that sounds a bit far-fetched actually because it didn't happen as well. So having that,
it's amazing how often that's actually the case.
Probably doesn't sell too many papers though.
Yeah.
What is it to be a good man these days?
I think almost everything we've just discussed, like just going, regardless of what I hear from other people or whatever that is, giving people the chance, I guess, to live their own lives, if that's for lack of a better term. I think like we are very quick to judge, especially with how much social media and stuff there is going on these days. We're very quick to judge other people, pin them as this, pin them as that. But at the end of the day, everyone's got their own struggles. And I think being a good man these days is about just respecting that different people go through different things, and all I can do is bring my best self to whatever relationship or situation I face, whether that be with your friends, with your partner, with your mates from work, with your mates from school, whatever it is, just going, how do I guess, bring my best self to this and I guess make others feel good for being around me. And I know the sort of me word, I don't like using the word me because it sounds a bit selfish, but in that case, it's good to be selfish. If you go, this is my best self, work out what that is and go, the more I can do this around others, the better I'm going to be.
It's great. And the other thing I'm hearing, Will, in that is someone who's asking questions, asking questions of themselves and of others and of the context and what they're hearing and what they're seeing, and I was just thinking as you were speaking as well about how, you were talking about, particularly in your field, like you're spending a lot of time with people, whether it's on the field or in training, and then you're presented with similar situations, but those situations are perceived really differently, and how that really struck you as, how can I see this so differently as how somebody else does? And I guess that's really where, something like empathy really begins as well.
Yeah.
That combination.
I think another good one to live by, and this is probably a bit contradictory considering you've asked me about 30 questions on this and I've asked you none, but another good one I heard was ask as many questions of others as you are asked of yourself. So if you live by that general rule, you're investing time in others and showing a genuine interest in them, then they're going to show a genuine interest in you and you're going to build a better connection or relationship or friendship or whatever you want it to be. So I feel like sometimes, especially if like good things are happening in our lives, we can often start thinking we're going pretty well. But if we can sort of keep going off that thing of trying to ask, like, obviously it doesn't literally mean, they asked me one, I have to ask them one, but be curious about others, like find out about them, because then you might actually learn that they see the world differently and you might get something from that improves your life or something along those lines. So make the effort to, make those connections with other people, because it definitely helps. Like you just end up meeting, and this is one thing I learned out of school as well, you end up meeting so many people from different backgrounds, different situations, like they've lived in different countries, different states, whatever it may be. I feel like especially in Brighton we get, there's a bit of a bubble. Like I know it's a bit of a joke, but like the Bayside bubble is a real thing, and you start thinking that's the real world, but it's just not at all. So, sort of being curious as to, and it just improves you as a person if you're curious in learning about how others have been brought up and what sort of drives them.
And I guess it also takes you back to that thing about earning the right to to really engage with somebody and know where they're, and that enriches the relationship because you've got that strong sense of connectedness and they know you, they trust you, you've shared what's common to both of you and what's different. And and a lot of that happens through asking those questions. It's fantastic advice. If you had a story you could tell a 14-year-old and he'd listen, what would the story be?
I wish I could tell my 14-year-old self this, and it's going to be more sort of advice rather than an actual story. But what I remember from when I was 14, I would have been year 8 going in year 9, is that, and I've sort of alluded to this earlier, but I was so keen to, be cool. Like I wanted to, do anything I could to make sure that the boys thought I was cool and stuff. And, I was doing all the right things to make sure that I was going to be popular. And I think the best bit of advice I could give to that is like, be yourself and try and be as comfortable within yourself as quickly as you can be, because it's amazing how the right people end up in your life for you when you just do that and you sort of forget about all that other stuff that occupies so much space in your mind around like, oh, what's he going to think if I say this, or what's he going to think, or what's she going to think, or whatever. But if you just go, I'm just going to be myself, then it's amazing how when you sort of take off that mask, the right people just gravitate towards you and you end up building these sort of real friendships that are built on sort of, I guess, the fundamental basics of going, there's two people that just can be themselves around each other and enjoy each other's company. So that'd be the big one. And the other one, and I always thought this was absolute crap when I was at school, that your school years are the best years of your life, but it is 100% true. There is no doubt about it. Like I look back on it and I'm like, I'll do anything to go back to school, hang out with like my core group of mates every day, go play lunchtime soccer, go play sport with them on the weekends. It was the best. It was the funnest sport I've ever played by a mile. And like during the week, like I wish I appreciated it more whilst I was there, because like we're not allowed to at the moment because we're in lockdown, but there's still about 5 or 6 of us that love going and just playing lunchtime soccer. And we may or may not jump the fence of the Mitchell, but we've decided we've given enough to the school over our time there that we're allowed, we've earned the right to do that. So we might jump the fence occasionally just because we have to relive those moments, just because it was just unbelievable.
Well, there's an easy way to get back to school, Will, and that's just once you've done this cricket thing, you can follow in the footsteps of your folks and become a teacher. Yeah.
Well, I hope if I do that, hopefully Brighton Grammar take me on. But yeah, as long as no one kicks me off the oval in the meantime whilst I'm playing my lunchtime soccer, I'll keep that option open.
Sounds fantastic. Will Pucovski, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute joy to talk to you, to hear your thoughts, to learn more about how you think about things and how you sort of break things down and offer a fresh perspective. There's so much in this conversation, I think, for our parents and also for the boys. So again, my thanks to you, and we do wish you all the best for the upcoming season.
Thank you very much, Ray. Thanks for having me.
We hope you've enjoyed this Understanding Boys podcast. Make sure you subscribe on your podcast app, and please leave us a review to help grow the community. For more information about the podcast, please visit understandingboys.com.au. Until next time, thanks for listening.